I didn't have time to understand what had happened. When I opened my eyes, the world was upside down. Literally, the seatbelt was crushing my chest, my right arm was pinned beneath the weight of the seat, and the sharp smell of fuel burned my throat. The windshield was shattered, though not completely, and through the cracks I could see the sky over the South African savannah, sliced by the twisted hood of the car. The silence after the impact was so heavy, my ears rang. I tried to pull in air and felt a brutal pain shoot through my left leg. Something was wrong, very wrong. Then I heard footsteps on the sand, firm, heavy, rhythmic. I turned my head as far as I could and saw him, a male lion, wild, far too massive to be a hallucination. His dark mane shifted in the dry afternoon wind. He stopped just a few yards from the overturned vehicle and watched me. My first instinct was to pound on the glass and scream. I needed to look alive, threatening, anything but prey. The car answered with a weak metallic groan. The lion blinked slowly, as if weighing every movement I made, then took 2 steps toward the vehicle. I could see the muscles moving beneath his golden skin, controlled, silent. The heat inside the car began rising fast, turning the interior into a suffocating greenhouse. Fuel dripped somewhere behind me. Drip, drip, drip. Each sound felt like a countdown only I could hear. I tried to reach the seatbelt latch with my free hand, but my fingers trembled, slick with sweat and blood. If you're feeling this tension with me right now, hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and comment below what city and country you're watching from. I truly want to see how far this story is reaching. Meanwhile, I remained trapped there, breathing thick, scorching air, feeling the pain pulse in my crushed leg. I forced my arm, trying to create space to reach the shattered dashboard, but the metal was jammed tight against me. The lion began circling the car. I saw his shadow glide across the cracked windows, moving slowly and silently around the vehicle as if deciding something. He stopped near the rear, lowered his head and sniffed the air. The wind shifted and carried my scent to him. Blood, fear, gasoline. For a second, I was sure that was the end, but the lion didn't charge. He lifted his head, went still, and turned his body toward the empty road behind him. His ears moved before the rest of him. He was hearing something I couldn't yet hear. The wind picked up, lifting dust around the overturned car. My heart pounded so loudly it seemed to echo inside the crushed metal. Then I heard it, a distant, uneven sound, almost like laughter cutting through the hot savannah air. Hyenas, more than one. The sound was getting closer, carried by the wind. My stomach tightened. The lion wasn't there out of mere curiosity. He had sensed the crash, yes, but now he realized others had sensed it too. He took a few steps forward, positioning himself between the car and the direction of the sound. I was still trapped, unable to move, with fuel leaking and heat rising. What I thought was the greatest danger might be the only thing standing between me and something far worse. The hyena's laughter grew clearer. It wasn't loud, but it was close enough to slice through the wind and slip into the car like a thin blade. I tried to move again, and my leg responded with such intense pain that my vision went dark for a second. Fuel kept dripping behind me, faster now. The heat was becoming unbearable. The air inside the vehicle felt thinner by the second. If the car caught fire, I wouldn't even have time to scream. I forced my trapped arm, shoved the seat with my shoulder, and managed to create a few inches of space. My fingers finally reached the seatbelt latch. I pressed it. Nothing. Pressed again, harder. It jammed. The car was tilted too steeply. Outside, the lion's posture changed completely. He wasn't watching me anymore. Now he stood rigid, alert, his body slightly angled forward. I saw the first hyena appear along the rolling line of the dirt road. Then another. They weren't running. They moved in an arc, assessing. The smell of fuel, blood, hot metal. It was an invitation. My heart began racing in a different way. It wasn't just fear of the lion anymore. It was the realization that I was caught in the middle of a dispute that had nothing to do with me, but could very well end with me. I grabbed the belt with both hands, and with a sharp movement, it finally released. I fell against the roof of the car, now the ground, and the pain in my leg nearly made me black out. I bit down on my own fist to keep from crying out. I had to get out before the fuel pooled. I dragged myself toward the shattered side window, pushing broken glass aside with my shoulder. The world outside looked too big, too open. The lion noticed my movement and turned his head toward me. Our eyes locked for a second that lasted far too long. I was about to crawl out, and I would have to pass him. The hyenas began making louder sounds, testing boundaries. The lion answered with a low, deep growl I felt vibrate in the hot air. He stepped forward, placing himself fully between me and them. It wasn't an attack, it was positioning. I pulled my body out of the car, collapsing onto the burning sand with my full weight on my injured leg. Pain exploded through me. I couldn't stand. I tried once, fell, tried again. My leg simply wouldn't respond. For a second, I thought I had made it. I was out of the car. The fuel was no longer the immediate threat. The lion was distracted by the hyenas. It felt like an opportunity. It felt like I could crawl away, disappear into the low brush beside the road. But when I tried to move, I realized something worse than being trapped inside the vehicle. I couldn't go anywhere, and now I was exposed, on the open ground of the savannah, between a lion and a pack of hyenas that was slowly closing in. The sand was too hot against my exposed skin. I tried dragging myself forward using my elbows, pulling my body inch by inch, but every movement made my leg burn from the inside, as if it were being twisted apart. The overturned vehicle was now a few yards behind me, fuel leaking onto the dry ground. The wind began to shift. At first it was just a stronger breeze, then it came in short, sharp gusts, lifting dust into the air. The savannah's horizon started to blur. I knew that sign. Sandstorm. And out there, in the middle of nowhere, there was no shelter. The hyenas moved a few steps closer, testing boundaries. 4 of them, maybe 5. Their low, muscular bodies advanced in an arc, searching for an angle. The lion answered with a short roar, not explosive, but deep enough to make the air vibrate inside my chest. He stepped forward twice, and the hyenas immediately backed off, though they didn't flee. They knew how to wait. That's when I realized this wasn't about an immediate attack. It was endurance, calculation, and I was the weakest variable in that equation. The wind suddenly intensified, lifting a curtain of dust that began to steal my vision. Sand struck my face, forcing its way into my eyes and mouth. I coughed, trying to shield myself with my arm. If the storm fully closed in, I wouldn't be able to see anything. Not them, not him, not even the road. I turned my back against the wind and saw the lion lunge quickly toward one hyena that dared step too close. It wasn't a prolonged assault, it was a warning. The hyena bolted, yelping, and the others retreated several yards. For a moment, it felt like everything had stabilized. The hyenas had pulled back. The lion stood firm, owning the space. I managed to drag myself to a small rise of hardened earth a few yards off the road. If I could stay there, maybe the reserve patrol would spot the overturned vehicle before nightfall. Maybe someone was already looking for me. Maybe. The wind kept building, but I convinced myself the worst had passed. That's when my body began to fail. My mouth was completely dry. My vision blurred at the edges. I had no water. I had lost blood. The sun still burned above the thickening clouds of dust. Every breath felt heavier than the last. I tried to stay conscious by counting the seconds between gusts of wind, but my head grew too heavy. The hyenas were still there, circling at a distance. The lion remained standing between them and me, and as the storm finally began swallowing the landscape, I realized something. Maybe it wouldn't be their strength that would bring me down. Maybe it would be the place itself. I don't know how long I drifted in and out of consciousness. The wind had become a wall. Sand hit my face like tiny needles. At some point I felt a shadow block part of the sun. I forced my eyes open, and he was there, too close. The lion had moved nearer, not in an attack posture. He stood slightly sideways, his body angled against the wind, as if creating a barrier. I could see the scar on his left front paw when he shifted his weight, a crooked, old line. My brain took a few seconds to connect that image to a buried memory. Years earlier, I had worked monitoring wildlife along the edge of the reserve. We received a call about a young male driven out of his pride after a territorial fight. He was injured, limping, too vulnerable to survive alone. When we found him, he tried to make himself look bigger than he was, but his paw couldn't bear weight. We sedated him from a distance, treated the partial fracture, and fitted him with a tracking collar to monitor his recovery before releasing him back into protected territory. I remember the crooked scar that formed after the bone healed. I had helped clean that wound myself, and now that same mark was only a few feet from my face. The wind howled around us, but inside that small bubble of heat and sand, something made sense for the first time since the crash. He wasn't there by accident. He wasn't there only because of territory. He had recognized me, not as a friend, not as an owner, but as something that had once been part of his story. The lion slightly turned his head toward me. His eyes weren't aggressive. They were alert, watchful. Then he looked back toward the storm and the distant shapes of the hyenas still trying to hold their ground, waiting for weakness. For a second, I felt something close to hope. If he stayed there, maybe the hyenas wouldn't approach. Maybe the storm would erase our tracks and someone would notice the vehicle on the road before dark. Maybe the old tracking collar was still active in some monitoring system. Maybe. But hope didn't hold my body together. My vision kept dimming. My fingers were numb. I tried to speak, but my throat produced only a dry, broken sound. The storm finally closed in completely. The world became a swirling wall of brown. I couldn't see the road anymore, or the car, or the horizon. Only the lion, partially visible through the sand, firm against the wind. He stepped closer, blocking part of the gust that struck my face. It wasn't conscious protection the way a human would do it. It was instinct, positioning, but in that moment, it was the only thing standing between me and total collapse. And as the storm roared around us, I realized something worse than fear. No one knew exactly where I was. The storm swallowed everything. The wind stopped coming in gusts and became a continuous roar, as if the sky itself were scraping against the earth. Sand forced its way into my ears, my mouth, my eyes. I tried to turn my face toward the ground, but every movement felt slower than the last. My leg no longer hurt the same way, and that terrified me more than the pain ever had. It meant my body was starting to shut parts of itself down to conserve energy. I was growing cold inside, even with the savage heat of the savannah crushing everything around me. The lion remained there. I felt his presence before I could clearly see him. The weight of his body changed the direction of the wind hitting me. At some point, he lay down, not beside me in some gentle gesture, but slightly ahead, forming a physical barrier against the storm. Sand struck his back, gathering along his dark mane. He kept his head raised, eyes narrowed against the wind, alert. Somewhere beyond the curtain of dust, I could still hear the distant laughter of the hyenas. They hadn't left. They were waiting for the storm to make the decision for them. I tried to move again. I had to stay conscious. I couldn't fall asleep. I dragged my hand through the sand and felt something solid beneath my fingers. A small stone. I clenched it tightly, as if it could anchor me to the present. I looked at the lion again. The scar on his paw was partially buried under sand now. He turned his head slightly, and our eyes met once more. There was no domestication there, no promise, just recognition. An animal that knew I was vulnerable. An animal that also knew others were waiting. The storm began to weaken as suddenly as it had started. The wind lost strength. The brown wall slowly thinned. The outline of the road reappeared. I could make out the overturned vehicle in the distance, half covered in sand. And then I heard something different. Not wind, not hyena. Mechanical, distant, uneven, like an engine struggling over rough terrain. I didn't know if it was real, or if my mind was inventing hope where none existed. The hyenas noticed before I did. Their sounds changed, sharper, more nervous. Two of them stepped back. The lion rose immediately, shaking sand from his body and moving forward several yards, asserting his presence once again. The engine noise grew clearer. Vehicles, more than one. I tried to lift my arm, but it barely left the ground. My vision darkened at the edges again. The last thing I saw before losing consciousness completely was the lion standing against the re-emerging horizon, and dust rising in the distance. But this time, it wasn't from the storm. It was from wheels approaching. When I opened my eyes again, the light was too white to be the savannah sun. The smell was no longer fuel and dust, it was disinfectant. I was lying in a narrow bed, my leg immobilized, tubes running into my arm. For a few seconds, I thought everything had been a hallucination brought on by pain and dehydration. But then one of the reserve rangers walked into the room. He told me that an old tracking collar signal had reappeared in their monitoring system during the storm. One of the technicians noticed unusual movement registered in the same location for hours. They went to check. They found the vehicle. They found me. And they found the lion still there. I forced my voice to ask the only question that mattered. He hesitated before answering, as if choosing his words carefully. He said that when the vehicles approached, the lion did not charge. He did not attack. He stepped back slowly, a few yards at a time, keeping his eyes on the trucks until he was certain I was being placed on the stretcher. Then he turned and walked toward the tall grass, disappearing as if he had never been there. No roar, no dramatic scene, just the same silent firmness with which he had appeared. Months later, when I could finally walk without support, I asked to be taken to the edge of the protected area, not to reunite with him. I knew it didn't work like that. Wild animals don't pay visits. They follow their own paths. But I needed to look at that landscape again. I needed to confirm it had been real. The wind was lighter that day. The savannah looked far too calm to hide what had happened there. I stood for a few minutes, leaning against the truck, watching the distant line of vegetation. And then I saw him, not close, not near enough to romanticize the moment. Just a golden silhouette emerging from the tall grass, motionless. He was farther away than I wanted, and exactly where he belonged. Wild, free, untouched. He watched me for a few seconds. I didn't raise my hand. I didn't call out. I didn't do anything that might turn that moment into something too human. After a while, he turned his head first, then his body. He walked back into the savannah until he disappeared completely. I remained there, breathing the same hot air that had once nearly killed me. Some connections don't need touch. They don't need proof. They don't need to be repeated to exist. That day, I understood something no camera could ever capture. Nature doesn't operate on friendship, but it doesn't forget either. And sometimes, surviving is simply recognizing who stands beside you when the entire world turns to dust.